On this episode of Race Talk with Lane and Eugene, Luis Quiros, professor of social work and public policy, speaks with us about the causes and effects of otherism and how it supports white supremacy, as well as the entrenched racism that exists in our higher education institutions.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good
Good
afternoon.
morning, good afternoon, good day, everybody. Welcome again to Race Talk with Lane and Eugene. I'm Eugene Holden. We're co-host here. I want to welcome all of the new faces. I'm not going to ask you to introduce yourself this time around because we have a special guest with us today. But I want to say welcome to you. Welcome to the faces who have been here with us since day one. We continue to grow. We continue to expand. We are doing some really good work here with Race Talk. Simply because you are here and Lane and I continue to show up because, as I like to say, your voice matters. So keep showing up, keep speaking about it, keep telling friends, keep doing what you do, and keep loving yourself, keep loving this thing called life. My sister Lane, good morning.
Well, and good morning to you, sir, and good morning, all Race Talk family. Boy, are we glad to see you, and do we have a treat for you today. Eugene and I just want to reiterate, as always, that this is a safe and loving environment for people to share their experiences and learn from each other. And sometimes we have to agree to disagree. And I think that you will really enjoy our speaker. We were due to have Reverend Masando Hiraoka, thank you, with us today. And at the last minute, he had a conflict. And we have for you today Professor Luis Quiros, who was nice enough to step in for us. And thank you, Professor, so much. And if you'll allow me, I'm just going to introduce you and then let you take off. How's that?
I'm ready.
All righty. You were born ready. So Professor Luis Quiros is an activist, an organizer, and an educator who is passionate about the field of social work and its potential for creating change. Professor Quiros has taught on the graduate and undergraduate levels on social work and public policy with a focus on race, class, and gender issues. Born of Puerto Rican and Venezuelan blood, raised in the streets of West Harlem, Luis Quiros learned early in life the value of forming a strong partnership between street smarts and scholarship. Quiros used this partnership to expose historical and sociological myths, as well as how fiscal policies and systems have plagued and affected the lives of those viewed as others. And just a minute, I'm going to mute everybody and unmute myself. Just a moment. All right, I think you can still hear me. So let me continue. Within classrooms and through writing and social commentary, Quiros goes beyond the research and captures narratives with a mentoring and community building intention. Through his roles within nonprofit and proprietary institutions, Quiros has brought expertise to challenge levels of service models that measure impact and how diversity and inclusion are defined. By transforming learning environments into creative, vulnerable, and critical thinking spaces, Quiros has experienced how social change is possible. He is the author of 2 books, An Other's Mind and Justice Unplugged. He is going to talk with us today about systemic racism in higher education and the causes and effects of otherism in our society today. And yesterday, he instructed me to invite everyone to challenge him with our questions because, in his opinion, if we don't do the hard stuff, then we miss the opportunity to make a difference. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you, Professor Quiros. And I'm going to say, folks, if you are not muted, please mute yourself and remain muted until we open the floor for questions, if you don't mind.
Good afternoon. And this is an opportunity that I often welcome. Last minutes don't really apply to people that do the kind of work that we do because we're always prepared and we're always waiting for it. The opening question I have reflected for today's talk is, how aware are we that what has happened during the last 2 weeks has been our history since before the forming of the 13 colonies? if what is reasonably moral is true, it dies with the lack of evidence when it comes to Europe's entrance into the Americas. The inalienableness of rights in the Declaration of Independence at the end of the 18th century meant nothing more or less than from then on, people, and not God's command or the customs of history, should be laws for ground zero, which should be our laws for ground zero. And the inalienableness of rights, the Declaration of Independence, when you take the Bill of Rights, the first 10 parts of the amendments, even the Fourth Amendment with the concept of due process. Well, due process is a myth for me and for many of us that are others because it's totally unaffordable. Not only is it unaffordable, access to it really requires there to be some form of eliteness be part of it. So Jefferson's desire for an intellectual, not moral attachment founded the University of Virginia in 1819, using a river for transporting materials and supplies, Black workers, and a curriculum of scientific racism. So again, when I use the word higher education, I'm also referring to / academia. And this lack of critical thinking is paramount for the success, the economic success that universities have had, undeserving. They have had that undeserving attention. Thomas Jefferson, in his notes of the state of Virginia, Thomas Jefferson was able to conclude that since Blacks secrete less by the kidney and more by the glands of the skin, they have a very strong disagreeable order. He declared that he had never found a Black man who had uttered a thought above the level of plain narration. Never saw one who had shown any understanding or appreciation of elementary levels of painting or sculpture. Again, the last 2 weeks, the horror of the last 2 weeks, as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of my students, was predictable. It was predictable as soon as Trump mentioned that he was going to run for office. A man who had no respect for people, had no respect for levels of checks and balances. How could he not flounder? And exactly what he did. And I look at that as an advantage to our system of democracy, because there's no way that the people, that the person who would follow Trump would have the narrative and the platform that they desired before Trump. In a way, Trump created the platform that the following two people will have, and Congress. It is often stated that immigrants built this country. And again, I go back to the faults of higher education. And I will argue that in this country, it was cotton. In fact, technological, medical, and scientific progress since the start of this nation would have never been possible without planning a community of others and exploiting our otherisms. The 10% that controlled the United States, and now since Citizens United, it is the corporations that have always controlled our democracy. No way can there be a democracy in this country, and I define democracy in many parts of my book as a fake democracy, first of all, no election could be legitimate if black people can't vote. No election could be legitimate with with the problems of voter suppression. No election could be legitimate with the lack of intellectualism that is given solely based on zip codes. No election could be legitimate when you have a campaign financing rules and policies that we have in effect today with the United States, with corporations affecting the outcome of elections. None of this, all of this, I should say, defines the myth of being the greatest democracy in the world.
So let me ask you this, Professor Quiros. Let me just interrupt you if I may.
Sure,
so I love it that you're setting the groundwork and giving the history. So you're saying that exploiting otherism has actually is how democracy, or how the United States has risen to the level that it has. And can you give me a little bit of information about that? What do you mean by exploiting otherism? And tell me a little bit about that, if you would.
The present one is race, class, and gender. You know, we have the skin color, our accent. We're up to the point where even what a female wears, the clothing of her attire, of her native attire, let's say from Africa, the way we wear our hair, that these are all otherisms because they defy the status quo. Assimilation is a strong policy in these United States, and to me, assimilation is just to me, assimilation is suicide. How can a black or brown person assimilate just by color? First of all, I don't want to assimilate. I have to enjoy my dual language, my dual culture. I love my Spanish music. I love being Puerto Rican. You know, I don't want to assimilate. I feel sorry for everybody else. You know, so you know that's an otherism. Accents. There are actually courses that teach people how to remove their accent, how to eliminate and minimize their accent. So these otherisms, the 10%, the distribution of our resources, the supply and demands, are based on a yield towards sameness. And you cannot have sameness and be free. How are you an individual if you're progressing towards sameness? Hannah Arendt writes a lot about the issue of sameness and its insanity. And if we're also the myth that we are a melting pot, well, I don't want to melt. First of all, my color doesn't melt. You know, black doesn't melt. You know, I don't want a melting pot. I want people that come to my house know that this is a black and brown house. You know, that you're probably not going to get a hot dog or a frankfurter. You know, you're going to get different kinds of foods. You know, so you're not going to get a beer. I hardly ever have beer in this house. You know, I just don't like beer unless I'm in Puerto Rico or in Cuba or some Latin American country where there's a beautiful beach. Well, and it's 90 degrees up. You know, they give me a cold beer, but other than that, I don't drink any of these sameness drinks. And I find assimilation a disaster and a product of the university. And Alexis de Tocqueville wrote a lot of what he wrote about the insanity of sameness and the gentleman's agreements, that there are gentleman's agreements in effect that create and push us into the arena of sameness and assimilation and policies that are trying to create the United States with a single language.
Can you say a little bit more about that? Because we spoke a little bit yesterday about how higher education pushes towards sameness, as you just said, and actually discourages people from being individuals, right? Like anyone who dares to be an individual, right? Yes. What's your experience with that?
You know, for the zip codes automatically do that throughout the United States. The zip code is a product a zip code is a product of racism and class and gender. And the I'm sorry about this. But it's not only zip codes. When we look at our children into the academia world, we have people that have students that have a tough time getting into advanced placement courses. We have Black and brown children that just by being Black and brown are automatically tracked into special education. This is all because they're not meeting the sameness of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant world of insanity. If we really cared about diversity and the destruction of the melting pot, languages should be taught in first and second grade where young people are not embarrassed to try to speak it. By the time they get to high school and learn a foreign language, I get a kick out of when they say the Spanish is a foreign language. Spanish was here before English was here, but foreign language.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what part of that is foreign, except the English part, but outside of that, the insanity of the United States and the mindset and the desire, and you see this all over, and you see the consequences when we talk about sameness and the desire for the border. Trump went to the border. Trump went to the border yesterday, and they talk about people going into, crossing the border. When the boundaries of the border, whether it be a river or a mountain, it's insanity. The problem is not the border. The problem is manifest destiny, that if the border, people crossing the border, it's a consequence. It's not the policy. Why do people cross the border? Why do people that would rather stay in their country and not risk them seeing their relatives or their mothers or being able to go to funerals? Why would we want to come to a place that such tradition and culture is broken? We go because we need to eat. We need jobs. We need education fails in being more interdisciplinary. Social work with MSWs and PhDs and psychiatrists and psychologists, they can talk greatly about their field, but also lacking is a knowledge of Karl Marx and economics. That interdisciplinary means you need a strong history background. My mentor, one of my greatest mentors and definite friend and in life that changed my life, was Dr. John O. Franklin, a African-American historian who I worked with, helped me edit my books and gave me concept on how to interpret history. This is the history knowledge, the history of our knowledge. The knowledge of our history in this country is weak. It's weak. I talk about globalization, and globalization, people talk when globalization started with Reagan. No, globalization started with the first slave ship that came to the Americas. That was globalization. But how many professors talk about globalization, that happened, 300 and 400 years ago? How is that not globalization? What are you talking about? And if you raise or if a professor, which I have, speak about this in the classroom, I know I'm going to get the dean to visit me. What globalization with the slave ship? Yeah, it did. Okay. So all of these myths, we lack critical thinking. We lack a curriculum because we're afraid of the grades that may follow. We have these scandals that came up during the last year, the last couple of years, that people paying for their wealthy parents paying for the kids to get into USC. If your kid can't get into USC without faking a boat rowing degree or a soccer degree, your kid's in trouble anyway. We're not talking about getting into extremely difficult university. But the payment of hundreds of thousands of dollars, I can't conceive of that.
Well,
But that's what happened. These are gentlemen's agreements.
well, what do you mean
That
by a
happened.
gentleman's agreement? Say this more, because I think that where that stems from, as you say, is that the Ivy League schools were built, you know, as a result of like trying to keep Black people out. Like this is exclusive, right? As a
Yeah.
result, as a
Oh,
reaction.
right. Over 60% of the alumni that enter the the uh, the Ivy League schools are alumni of the kids themselves.
Right. And it is still a policy, as you're saying, an unwritten policy or a policy of keeping these people out, and let's keep this pure, and that somehow the history of any of those people is not valuable. See, the thing about the history is at first you have to think that someone else's history other than yours is valuable, right? Because why would you look over there?
Right.
And acknowledging someone else's history weakens yours, right? It's that, like you said, that gentleman's agreement, right? Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's even more forceful. It's even for military. People think that the military, you got to wear a uniform. You know, that you're dressed in khakis in a uniform. I think we should start looking at a military uniform as a three-piece suit and a tie.
Oh my goodness.
There is no difference between a military uniform and somebody that wears a three-piece suit and goes to meetings.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Can you say a little more?
Wall Street has a lot to do with Wall Street and behind the wheels of politicians. They're conniving, and what they do in order to get their policies through is a form of military. If they decide who gets the food, how food is distributed, how the resources are distributed, and they do this through zoning laws in communities in the suburbs, in getting permits for buildings, in the entire industry of permits is one controlled by gentlemen's agreements. That it's assumed that since they can't write this in print, that behind in the bars while they're having their drinks, if you do this for me, I'll do that for you. You know,
Yes.
and we're not invited into these country clubs. You know, country clubs are not really for Black and white people, even for women. There are many country clubs.
And it sounds like kind of what you're saying is that higher education institutions in some ways are like country clubs.
It is a country club.
Yeah, it's a country club. Oh my goodness, I love that.
How is that not a country club? You know, it's I mean, just go to the lunchrooms and see who goes there, and that's tied into affirmative action. A lot of people think that affirmative action. I mean, and this is education again. The affirmative action for Black and brown people that will give you 10 points more on an exam, on a civil service exam or for a job. But that's not true. If you're white, you walk in. If you're affirmative action is being white. I mean, if you're white, you have the contact to Congress. You know the right people. You know you're white, so things are easier for you anyway. Send in a resume, exact resume with somebody that's Black and brown, and show the picture, and see the white person get the job because they're white. Then how is whoever said affirmative action for Black and brown people? You know, it's not. It's white people, and we're trying to break the white strike. You know, it's a consequence of affirmative action having been controlled by white people.
Well, let me just say this too, that feeds into something that we spoke about yesterday as well. And I know that I want to maybe in 5 minutes open for Q&A. But one of the things you said was, you know, that legislation very often is symbolic, right? It's symbolic. It's not real. It doesn't have the effect that it's said it's meant to have or intended to have. And that we celebrate these symbolic victories that really haven't made a darn difference, right? So you were talking about Juneteenth, and we were talking about like all of these things. So affirmative action and civil rights, and yes, it did something. Police reform, for example, like we have to wake up and actually get something that we can see and try to enforce And how hard is that to break that line in front of
Just
that
about
country club?
impossible. I mean, it's not impossible. It will be done. Uh, but many people will die in the meantime. I live in an area where the police the chief of police doesn't even have an associate degree and he's never taken a diversity course. You know, this is rampant throughout the United. That's not any different. If it was up to me, and I say this in my book, police officers should first of all have no less than a graduate degree and be paid more. You know, you need to know more. You know, but that doesn't benefit those people that own the wealth in community. People that own the wealth want those police officers to take care of the others, to eliminate the others, to make sure the others don't move too close to them, because otherwise the value of the condominium, co-op, or house is going to go down. So this is all intertwined. It's not an easy thing to solve. Uh, Many will die. Many will continue to die, and even this COVID is not new. In when you get my website, you're going to see back in 2017 that I was on the radio, my own radio hour, and during phone calls, a social scientist and myself predicted that there's going to be a flu epidemic in this country in 3 years. We just about called it to the day. How do we not know this? Because the epidemic in this country is mental illness. It's not the COVID. In Puerto Rico, during my mother's time, one of the reasons my mother came to this country was because in Puerto Rico, there was a government policy to get women the age of my mother, my teenage mother, sterilized.
Yes.
You know, sterilization in Guatemala and in parts of the world, you know, in the manifest destiny. You know, what's manifest destiny? A way to get Europe away from South America to the United States of white people, and the corporations control the sun. How could anybody from Guatemala be hungry? It's not impossible for anybody to live near the Amazon and be hungry. They got all the food in the world that would want to, but you know, why is this happening? Who's controlling United Fruit Company? Who's controlling all these companies? How are the people that crossing the border, how can they be hungry when they were all farmers? They had their land, they had their, you know, 40 acres and a mule. Oh, we studied, that's one of the, you know, questions. 40 acres and a mule. Not one black person got 40 acres or a mule. They, you know, we were the victim. What are you talking about, 40 acres and a mule? And the Emancipation Proclamation? I don't need the government to tell me I'm free now, you know? As soon as they said I was free, I felt more imprisoned. You know, I'm free. Well, you have something up, you know, up there someplace, because I'm free by God's choice. You know, I don't need to celebrate my freedom. You know,
So let me ask you this.
My birthday.
So pardon the interruption. So let me, as we open the floor for Q&A, I love what you're saying, first of all, and we could listen to you talk forever. Let me ask you this then. What needs to happen in academia, do you think, for this to shift, right? What needs to happen? What can we as citizens do?
I think the professors that get in front of a blackboard or crossboard or wherever the hell they're getting in front of better start living in the streets. And I don't mean living in the streets. Though I lived in the streets, I was homeless for 2 weeks to find out what it's about. No, you still have a choice to come out, and you know you're coming out anyway. I think academia, and I'm strong on this, and you said it when you introduced me, academia without street smarts and street art is not academia. That there's a requirement for streetwise people. You know, if I have to follow someone to save my life, I'm not going to pick the academician. I'm going to pick the person that's in the street and figure out how we're going to survive the next day. That academia is weak. It's weak in not introducing critical thinking. It's weak in its. I was taking doctoral courses at Union Theological Seminary, and we were talking. It was an course on ethics, and they were talking about how important art is in this country. And art is for revolution. How positive it is, and I totally agree with that. But I raised my hand. How come we're giving examples of art, but how come nobody's mentioned graffiti? And I said, put on the board graffiti. I told my kids, if you really want to know history, go around in the inner city and take a look at the graffiti. And then you get really, that's better history that's written in books. You know, that's a true history. You know, but we don't want to acknowledge us. Why do you think Columbia University owns most of Harlem now? You know, so if we want to answer your question, we have to get us, people like the others, in front of that classroom. And we got to stop. We have to start publishing our own books, self-publish, because publishers, in order for the professors to get tenure, the professors write things that publishers want to read that are basically aligned with sameness.
Yes.
The radical, that the true critical thinking is better from us, from avenues of self-writing these books and getting them out there.
Yes.
It may not be as fancy. I'm not getting any advance, but I'm saying what I want to say, and that Shippy said, and we got to get the tenured people out of there.
Well, that's it. The tenure, you can't get tenure in many of these
My
universities.
daughter's a PhD.
If you challenge
and,
something.
A black Puerto Rican woman that's a PhD and with tenure, and the statistics for people like her are less than 2%. 2% of the population. So in order for it to have done that, we had to do somersaults.
So let me say this. So is one of the things to do, first of all, teach more, right? So if we have these degrees, we need to make sure that we teach more. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a university, but would you say that we just have to teach more of what we know so people get the information and appreciate who they are? And also, what do you think about it being kind of really an urgent thing for us to start funding historically Black universities? Just because if the Ivy League schools are getting all this funding, but HBCUs are not getting the funding, and we need to really put that out there. Do you think that that is also a bit of a solution that can possibly be?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, a great comment you're being. I think in order to be anti-racist, all of us that's listening to the Zoom and people that you know must be teachers. Don't think because you're not getting paid as a teacher or professor. We are teachers in the street. So every time we hear or say something wrong, even though it could cost you, you're at risk. When I hear something wrong at a table, at a restaurant, or in those days or whatever, I say something. So I'm always arguing with people. You know, why'd you say that? Doesn't make sense. Where'd you get that from? You know, and my daughter and kids and everybody around me say, stay out of it, Dad. You know, well, you know, stay out of it. And I can't
we can't afford to stay out of it. Yeah, we
I can't afford to, you know, and I've lost opportunities and jobs. I get fired a lot, you know, but, you know, I'm not going to change. You know, so we have to accept this risk because I am a teacher. You know, yeah, I got paid at Fordham and other places as a professor, but that was, you know, that doesn't define me. What defined me as a teacher is what I did in the streets. You know, so these are good points of how we define what teachers are.
So let me do.
Second of all.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, hon. And then I'm going to open the floor for Q&A.
Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say was I was going to go ahead and open the floor for Q&A. Eugene, I want to just go ahead and turn it over to our co-host, and there are people that are already lining up with questions. I see Gail and I see Joe Majak. Eugene, please moderate this if you will. I'm just going to go on mute. Thank you, Professor Quiros.
So yeah, so let's go ahead and start with Gail and then Joe, and I saw Tyrone. Gail, Joe, and then Tyrone.
Okay. My heart is beating so fast right now. I'm just feeling so emotional. So please be patient with me while I try to express these words for the first time. You know, I've been, like so many others, wondering how so many blue-collar, white people could be following Trump. And I've been reading the book Caste, which many of you are familiar with. So no doubt, no wonder I'm so emotional. And what I'm trying to wrap my brain around, because I'm hearing this for the first time, is that the reason is that within the white caste, there's the bottom rung, which are the poor and blue collar working class white people who have been enculturated to believe that they are at least not at the real bottom rung, because below them are people of color. And to consider equality with people of color is a threat to being above someone, being above others, and having the privilege of others. So that if people of color rise up in equality, those white people feel that they lose something instead of gaining something. And so when it comes to education, higher education, all I can think is that this kind of history and reasoning needs to be taught at young ages, the true history of our country, which includes the beauty and all the ugliness. And I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, but how to eliminate that fear of, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. The fear is an economic fear that they feel if they join up with the weaker other, if they go down a knob and they're closer to the weaker, that will alienate them from better jobs and the social circle that's important to them. And this is where I totally agree with you, that our education in the beginning of of our elementary school needs to be advanced. This is why the program for this today was how education, academics, and higher education is a fault of this. This is where we have to look at. We have to revolutionize where Black History Month is a ridiculous month. There is no history without Black people. So, what means Black History Month? White History Month make more sense, and according to reality. But, there is no United States without Black and brown people. So, we have to recognize that this is old strategy. We have to break the strategy. And when Lane asked me about historically Black college, absolutely. If any of you get my books, and I hope you do, but every time I talk about Harvard or any university or UPenn or whatever, I always preface it. I don't say Harvard or Columbia University. And I grew up in Harlem, the first 25 years of my life in Harlem. I call Columbia historically white Columbia University. So if we have historically Black college, I said, let's make this even. Let's create a little argument here. So I say historically white Columbia University, historically white Harvard, historically white, to let people know that higher education has been divided by race. And absolutely, I mean, I love baseball. My son got a scholarship to Lehigh University.
Professor Quiros,
etc. And I was upset.
Professor?
Hello?
I'm sorry, Professor?
Yeah.
I love baseball too, but I want to get, because we were on this time frame, and I want to make sure that enough people get to ask their questions.
You're right,
okay?
You're right. I have a tendency. That's why I'm glad that we got two people controlling me here. But just quickly, I was upset when Black baseball player merged into the white league. We should have kept it separate. He was better.
Professor, slow down. Joe?
All right, go ahead.
Good morning, Professor. Thanks a million for joining us. I want to ask you, just for a couple of minutes, to kind of stretch yourself outside your comfort zone with what I want to ask you a question about. Your comments were focused at the university level. Some might argue that, that's good, but it's too late. It's too late to wait to get to the university level to start to expose students to real critical thinking and the true facts of American history. The K through 12 system it's plain vanilla. it's highly steered toward a myth, and I would just argue it's too late. So my question is, and you're a New Yorker, the state of Connecticut has figured out a way to implement mandatory curriculum to have history that doesn't apply, that introduces people of color, et cetera. What do you think it will take for the state of New York and for Governor Cuomo to make the next step on progressive responses to multiculturalism and anti-racism to see change at the K through 12 level and get the truth out when people are younger, not wait until they get to college? Because like me, I went through college, I didn't take a single course in history. I went to a liberal arts college. I didn't have a single course in history, which is a sin. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Professor.
Oh, no, thank you for the question. First of all, I find it hard to admit that it's too late. This country is still a baby. You know, when you think of Egypt and education and Athens and Africa, you know, education, this country is still in its baby stages, only a few hundred years old. So I don't think it's too late, or maybe I don't want to admit it, but we have in New York State an organization. I'm part of an organization called Westchester Alliance of Black Educators, and we're trying to, and we're not the only ones doing this. We're pushing Albany to require a new curriculum that introduces our Black history throughout, and it's revolutionary. And what I will do, I will email to Lane and Eugene the program and the bill we're trying to get across and the details of the bill that revolutionizes how education in New York State is going to happen, like Connecticut is doing. So I don't want to get into now, because that will change the entire topic. But I will send this information, and hopefully, that's why I said about 10 minutes ago that we are all educators. What do we talk about when we're at the dinner table with our kids? We need to bring this up. And again, an opportunity for Donald Trump. Donald Trump, with his hate messages, gave us a cloak line in order to bring up these topics and discuss them. So, you know, I'll send the information to Eugene and Lane.
Thank you. Yes. We'll go with Tyrone and then Frank.
Excuse me. Well, Eugene and I often talk about the Book of Brown. So from the Book of Brown, good God, okay?
Good God.
Good God. Couple notes I want to make. You remind me, Brother Quiros, of a cultural and racial justice fire hose. Okay, and it's like coming full blast, and that's a good thing because it's overdue. And I was thinking how interesting this was. If we had this conversation about before Trump, you would have appeared far more radical, quote unquote, what radical means, than this conversation is now. To me, right now, you're hitting home on a lot of stuff that people in the past didn't want to talk about because it made them feel uncomfortable. And you know, Joe, you're talking about coming out of the comfort zone. That's a big comfort zone to come out of. You know, comfort zone is cool, it's beautiful, but nothing grows there, right? So you gotta get out of it. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that all of us on this call, let's take a deep breath and ask yourself, how were you responding to what Quiros was saying? What was that? Were you turned off? Did he go on and on? You just, oh, this is just another guy talking about this shit. You know, excuse my language, but you know, is it that? You know, did you get something out of it? Look at how you reacted to that. I think that's more important almost than what he's saying, because we all are being pushed out of where we've been used to being in. That's been going on since race talks had started, actually. You know, it might maybe even beyond that for many of you who really believe in studying and reading stuff. But I just want to invite us to take a minute. You don't even have to react or respond to it, but to ask yourself, take a look at how you're reacting to what he's saying. And if there's anything in you that is like really disturbed by this or whatever the case is, I say that's good. I mean, not that you're feeling pain. I don't want anybody feeling discomfort or pain, but it's a good thing if we could grow from it and realize that some of the things that are being said, many of the things are being based on truth. Now, maybe we don't like the way it's being said, but that's a different story altogether. It's all how we want to receive things. So I'm complete, but I just wanted to add that comment.
Thank you, Tyrone.
Tyrone, can I say something for a second?
Yes.
It's okay with me.
Yes.
Chardona, I happen to notice that one of my students is listening
Yes, I'm
to the
here.
Zoom, and she's talking now. What do you think about what Tyrone said about me being radical or whatever in the classroom?
I definitely think having the opportunity to sit underneath you for your wisdom as a professor, you challenged all of the classes, right? Everyone to think, to Tyrone's point, how does what you've learned impact you? Why do you feel the uncomfortability that you feel? And then how will you shift yourself into being a member and agent of change? And it really starts with that, challenging our beliefs and value system. And it's something that's needed and something that's consistent. To Joe's point earlier about K through 12 grades, right? So that really, for people of color, is a prison to pipeline process, right? So in schools where there are children of color, they're going through metal detectors. They are seeing people that are before them that are not from their community, that don't understand them. They get shifted into special education classes. So there's a lot of work that we have to do. And I think to everyone's point earlier, that really starts with each of us taking the platforms that we have daily and challenging our own views and the views of others to make that change.
Great. Thank you so very much. Well said. I want to go with Frank, and then, hang on, after Frank, we'll go to Lynn, and then Dr. Felicia, and then we'll start to wrap this up. Frank, Lynn, Felicia.
Professor, I have a thought for you to think about and a suggestion. You had mentioned teaching Black history at the college level, and Joe had made the suggestion that we need to start earlier. I think we need to approach history from a bit of a different perspective, not just Black history, but Hispanic history, Asian history, gay and lesbian history, because the reality is until we start teaching the history of different groups that exist throughout our world, then we will never have an understanding of each other and possibly never grow into a deeper sense of oneness. It is, and because we have people who hate, for example, gay people just because they're gay. But the reality is until we understand each other, there will be no oneness. And oneness is the reality that's going to bring us to unity. Now that oneness isn't Pollyanna. It requires justice. And then that justice has to come with healing. So people need to take responsibility for their, in our current situation, as we have faced in the last 2 weeks, we're going to need our politicians to face responsibility in order to, and take accountability for their actions. And if they don't, then that still needs to happen, or else we will never really have true healing.
Yeah. Frank, I agree with what you said, and that's why I use the word others, because others include, yellow people also, not only Black and brown. And many Latinos are Black by definition anyway. I define myself as Black, and I'm Puerto Rican. So, but I think what I like is why I use the word others. That we are all others in some capacity that makes us different, which is why I'm against sameness. And when the world figures out that we are all others, there will be permanent peace. That permanent peace can only be achieved when we define ourselves uniquely as who we are, and that we are other, and the person next to us is also an other, and together we make America. And together this diversity, this moral diversity, not just the word diversity the way it's thrown, it's a cheap word the way it's discussed today, is our otherism, that your otherism for your sexual preferences, your patterns, who you prefer to be with, is something that we have to respect, should respect. So when we discover that we are all others and entitled to these values then we will be free. And one of the things that our education refuses to explain is that until the person next to us is free, none of us are free. I don't think that a multimillionaire who can do what they want is free. They have what is called a ghetto mindset. A ghetto mindset is not just a building or an inner city. A ghetto mindset literally is a state of being that you can't get out of. There are a lot of white rich people that I know that are living in a ghetto. They do not want to leave that situation or that divorce because they will lose their country club, they will lose their status, they will, they can't afford it, so a ghetto mindset it doesn't pertain to just living in the inner city. Because I think people in the inner city are probably more free with their freedom, more free to themselves, than people that are living in palaces.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Frank. Thank you so very much for bringing all of that up. The others, then we're going to Lynn and then Dr. Felicia, and then we're going to wrap this up.
Okay. So Professor Quiros, thank you for your wisdom. Talk about the historically Black colleges and universities and their role or lack of role in teaching the real history.
Black history universities should be better funded, without a doubt. And I think we're going to see a trend that Black universities, historically Black colleges, are going to start be getting many more applicants from other areas, because the picture and the consequences of being in a mono looking environment is being discovered as sickening and false education. For all the money that's being paid for that, they're not being educated. They're being uneducated. And that's an expensive tuition. So I see, just like in baseball, just like you had the black leagues, we're going to see the Black universities getting many more applicants that are non-Black, in order to appreciate the talent that those Black baseball players had, that we could learn from from baseball, Black baseball, that if you really want to play good baseball, you better go to a community that has a lot of Black people in it, because I think we are better.
So are you saying that with more white people going to, or other people than Black going to historically Black colleges, that's going to strengthen the HBCUs, or that's going to weaken them?
Yeah, I'm saying that it's going to give it a lot more credibility, and rather than mention the color, I would like to add that they're going to be getting a lot more otherisms to go in, because the historically Black colleges are prepared for the otherism like no one else is. This is why Dr. Franklin, who like a great man in my life, he went to Fisk, and he was a professor there, and people that go to historical, and I know many people my age and younger went to historical. They're ahead of it. They're ahead of it. I mean, we're ahead of all this stuff. So I think we're going to see. I think there's a parallel here. I'm not trying to minimize it by talking about baseball, but imagine basketball and baseball if it was just one color. That we're going to start seeing. If a white basketball player in college or in high school wants to get good, he better find the inner city and practice there, and then let me know if you're really good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Dr. Felicia.
Yes, thank you. I'm just so really appreciative of how you were describing the experience of being a Black professor in a predominantly white university. When I went through my graduate program, I was the only woman and the only Black person in my graduate school. When I moved to Boston College, I was one of 8 Black faculty just hired that year out of 300 faculty members. And I want to emphasize the importance of mentorship and allyship, because it's so important to find the people who are in more of the dominant stream, who believe in people of color, who will support them moving through, and who have the power to stand up to those that we can't stand up directly to without being smacked down or disadvantaged even further. The people in my life, both within the university as well as those people around me who believed in me, are the ones who made the difference. And when I finally got into a position in the university where I could pass that on, the importance of standing up as a model to other people of color, and I'm talking broadly, people of color, not just Black people, but all of us who have been marginalized in different ways. And being I can't tell you how many times people came up to me and said, because you're here, I believe that I can. And I believe that's something that all of us have, whatever realm that we're in, that one, we can support our teachers, K through 12, university, wherever they are. If we stop and say, you know, how are you doing as you're trying to be out there on the skinny branches doing something? Let me be the one to believe in you, to remind you that you can, to be there in the days when everybody else is beating you down. And those people that we have as colleagues, each and every one of us can stand up and use whatever privilege we have to support people in moving forward. So I'm appreciative for this opportunity and the fact that we're all here because we believe that something else is possible.
Yes.
You know, it pains me. I teach at Stanford right now, and some of the things that the Stanford graduate students are going through is the same, the Black students, the same thing that I went through 30 years ago. And so it's got to change, and we've got to be the ones. And I'm so glad that you're here bringing so much forward to encourage us to do that. Thank you.
Wow.
Go ahead. Well, this has been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful hour of Race Talk. Professor Luis Quiros, thank you so much for being here. Again, I want to thank all of the Race Talk family for being here and continuing to show up. You know, spread the news. Let people know what's going on here at this time on Wednesdays. You know, because the more that we have engaged in this work, and this is some powerful work that we're doing, the more that we are engaged, we get to, as Dr. Felicia said, we get to start changing the world, and we start changing the world by changing ourselves, and then changing our neighborhoods and our cities and our states and our nation and the world. We are so happy that you all are here. Again, Professor Luis, thank you for being here. We look forward to seeing you guys all, seeing you all next week. Seeing all of you next week.
If I can end by saying one thing, I do not,
yes.
To do what Eugene said, it takes a lot more than an anti-racist course. This isn't about a quick fix. How do we fix this anti-racist course? An anti-racist course doesn't. It may be a start, but it doesn't come close to doing it. There's a lot more, as Eugene and many of you have said, in the way Lane started. So, thank you all, and there is no quick fix here.
Just keep moving, keep grooving, keep doing the work. Lane?
Thank you so much, Professor, for being our guest today, for stepping in at the last minute, and boy, are we glad you did. And you have given us so much to think about, and we are so grateful for your presence. Folks, as Eugene said, just keep showing up. We're gonna keep giving you things to think about and things to talk about in your communities. Remember, this is stuff that we just can't afford to keep to ourselves. So share the show, but share what you now are learning, because this is so valuable. And I'm just so moved to have everyone's
partnership here, and I know I speak for Eugene also, every Wednesday at noon, to come together with this group of people for this kind of partnership is absolutely astounding and a privilege. Professor Quiros, you are welcome anytime, sir.
I'll be on. I'm gonna consider me a habit.
Yes. All right. A good habit to have.
Not many people want to welcome me. It's all right. Thank you.
Well, we certainly do. All right. All right, folks. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Bye, Zulma.